Welcome to the webinar, everyone. My name is Jamie Gleason. I am the Director of Undergraduate Initiatives here at Capture Higher Ed, and I'm really excited that you took some time out of your day to spend with me. Originally, I was going to be co-presenting with my longtime friend and colleague, Heather Mueller, but she actually has had some things come up that she's not going to be able to make it, so you only have me today. Apologize if you were looking forward to talking to Heather. If that is the case, please write me a note and I'll make sure that I get her in touch with you directly. Today we're going to talk about 3 steps to winning in the digital dependent environment. And these steps are going to be critical as we consider the context of where we are and what we're coming from. And as we're speaking about what we're coming from, let me just say, my description there of who I am. I've been at Capture for 5 years. 4 of those years were in the role of an account executive. Prior to coming to Capture, I ran 2 admissions offices within the Philadelphia area. I'm coming to you live from Philadelphia today, or from just north of the city. And I do want to make one quick note. In my area, we just had a massive thunderstorm go through. I'm not sure what the next 30 minutes hold. I'm hoping that we don't have any power glitches or anything like that, but Emma and I have already worked out a plan in case that does happen. So I'll stop with that and let's get into it. Most of you probably read a description about this webinar, and you were in the midst of probably these questions that are happening within everyone today. The questions of what's next? How do we respond to the environment that we find ourselves in? And is there a plan for the rest of the summer? And if there isn't, how do we make one? The situation that is surrounding us with COVID-19 has very much impacted so many different things. The vendors that we use, the way we think about the funnel, the areas of focus that we want to put on it. So what we're hoping today is to deliver to you 3 critical tactics that can help you redeem the cycle that you're in, and 3 ways that you can turn the tables on these uncertain times. Now, I want to make sure that I'm very clear. These variables that we face are just those. They're variables, and there are a lot of questions that remain to be answered. A lot of geography that plays into the variables that we're facing. So I want to just make that clear, and I actually have a slide later on, so I'm jumping ahead already. Let me start by telling you a little bit about who Capture is, and hopefully you know a little bit about our company already, but what makes us experts in discussing this? Capture comes to you today with a number of different items, tools in the toolbox, but our Capture as a company is a behavioral intelligence platform, a single platform that looks at behavioral insights and tactically applies those to your funnel, and it helps understand and make sense of what's happening. And also transitions that into solutions, and it's all at the heart of it, it's powered by services. And those services are carried out by individuals, professionals who have been in the enrollment space, because that is where we live. Capture is a company that is higher ed focused. Exclusively, we have built our reputation and our tools in the higher ed space. And what I want to do today, what I hope to do today, is to be able to share how some of those insights can lead to tactical responses that you can implement right away in order to change the shape of your funnel and potentially the outcome of your fall. Again, like I said, here's the elephant in the room. And I had to include an elephant in the room slide in order to make sense of this, but there are variables that we don't know the answers to. I know as a Philadelphian, not far, 90 minutes outside of New York City, the context that I face here, that we face here, the institutions in Philly face, are very different than those, say, in some parts of the South or the Midwest. Very different than rural Maine or places like that. So there are variables that you need to contextualize as you're thinking about what we offer today. But I've tried to create this presentation so that it's broad enough that everyone can walk away with something to put into practice. That is my goal. For those of you who know me, I am an uber practical guy. I like to make sure that we're doing as much, and even in my profile it says I'm a fixer and a farmer, and I think both of those things actually fit very well into the enrollment space and what we do. So here are the three things. Number one, we're gonna help understand what today's targets are. We're gonna retool for the task, and then I'm gonna try to help get you started. Now, I use the word in number one, knowing today's targets. I use the word today for a very precise reason. The audiences that we face are dynamic, you know, and we're going to get into this a little bit later as we look at some analytics. But the audiences that we're looking at, they are changing not only day to day, week to week, but certainly month to month. I think many of you, if I could see your heads, you would be nodding when you said, I'm not sure I would be focusing this much at this time of the year on applications. And what we're hoping to do today is cover some area that really has to do with first year students, and especially those sections of the funnel that are still very viable. Now, Capture has spent, and Emma can vouch for this, we have spent a lot of time in the last 6 to 8 weeks thinking about transfers. And I know as a former director of admission, like my life would very much be focused on transfer students right now in a quote unquote normal year. But this has not been a normal year. So we're gonna actually push through transfers. All that material, those links are gonna come to you after the webinar today. You can go in and dig into that stuff if you haven't already. Watch the webinars, read the stuff, and let me know if there are questions. But for today's purposes, what we're gonna do is really focus on admit to yield and prospects that might be newly emerged in your funnel. So let's get started. Today, we wanna know about our audience. We all understand in the enrollment space the power of analytics, right? Google Analytics are very helpful. They provide these macro level data sets. They help us understand like what are the nuances and what are the URLs that are most frequented. What can I get from that? When are students abandoning and items like that? They're macro. But sometimes there's a delta between what is macro level data and how do we turn that into a tactical tool? How do we use it? How do we take those data points, those insights, and make them actions? So what I wanted to do today is show you a little bit about some of the insights that Capture partners are getting and receiving. This graph that you see in front of you shows identified traffic to partners websites. Now this is aggregated, so there's no one partner that we're looking at. This is looking at all 82 Capture partners and the insights that we're gaining. And as you can see by my big red circle here, there was a massive trough that existed right about the time when everyone left out on spring break. And we were all concerned, you know, what's gonna happen to the funnel? We're not sure about it. It's admitted student days, like a lot of these things happening, a lot of questions and uncertainty emerging. But then as we move into the later points of the cycle of March and into April, we actually see that the traffic for fall 20 surpasses that of fall 19. And we're able to say, okay, take a little bit of a sigh of relief and say, okay, the traffic is back, the students are back on your site. This leads to assurance. For many of you, if those of you don't have those levels of insight, that actually will help you tactically develop a plan and move forward with that plan in order to impact that section of the funnel. Deep web insight is really, as we think about the digital era that we're in, deeper web insight is really one of the only ways that we have to understand where are our students. And I don't just mean where are they geographically, I mean where are they? Like when my wife and I are having a talk and I'm looking off into the distance and she says, where are you? You know, that kind of where are you? But there's more, but wait, there's more, as the traditional infomercial would say. The overall traffic is great. That aggregated graph that I showed you on the previous slide is one thing, but then on top of that, Capture is able to take that aggregated data and break it down by status. We can understand in looking at this status that there are still viable audiences to move forward with. And I'm gonna call attention here quickly to this section right here in the middle. We see that while other sections of the funnel are trending low, inquiries and prospects are below 2019 levels, we see here that applicants, app starts, and admits are up, and they're up above last year. And in fact, if you look, they're trending potentially the opposite direction when you look at the applicants. So what does this mean for us? It means that we understand and are able to see these insights, and we are able to translate these levels of insights into tactical applications for our partners. What this does is truly help us understand, you know, as the title of this section, truly helps us to understand today, where is the traffic on our site and what do we do with that traffic? What do we do with those students who are showing up on our site? And here it is. Here is the, you know, the application of these data points. Here we have a profile of an individual student where we can see that this student has taken actions on the website that are directly related to where their status is. We can understand that they have that we see the profile information, the tag information to understand like what are the questions that they're asking, and then what we're able to do, and we haven't done it yet because you can see here that this is a brand new applicant to the pipeline, a brand new Fall 20 applicant to the pipeline for this institution. And while you don't know where the institution is, I can tell you that this student is a local, is in a very close proximity to that school. So what does this tell us? What is it ultimately, where do we go from here is that we can operationalize the insights that we gain from the data that we see, and we can turn those into campaigns, which I will get into in just a second. This helps us ultimately to understand that there are some things to really consider, right? We've all read survey material. We've all understood that, you know, there's this macro level of fear of students in the uncertain times of not knowing what's going to happen in the fall. They're starting to question, or they're starting to look at institutions who are closer to home. The previous profile that you see, it actually reinforces that thought. That student is close to home and he is a late cycle applicant into that school's pipeline. So Capture as that institution is able to leverage that data and build personalized campaigns in order to push that student further along, answer the questions that they have, respond to what they have. But you might be asking, hey, what do I do if I'm not a Capture partner? How do I get this? Well, the good news is you can apply this data, you can apply this insight as a stratified sample to where you are, right? We believe at Capture, as we've seen from our partner data set, that the app start, the applicant, and the admit pools are still super viable, and in fact, more viable than they were last year. That's a reason for hope. And we also know that the prospects and inquiries that are on your site are actually very active. And even though I didn't focus on those trend lines in the status graph that I shared a couple slides back, it does look like those groups, those top of the funnel groups, are going to be trending up, and that we will be able to see more of their activity throughout the summer. Let me call one piece of attention to a piece of content that we actually just released today. We've been working on like kind of the how-to of what do I do with this information? Like, you know, if my funnel's changing, and if Capture, or if there are students at the top of the funnel that I need to find or that I need to reconnect with, how do I do that? How do I figure out which ones to go after? How do I, you know, using just kind of tools that are available for anyone, how can I do that? Emma's going to put in the chat tool a link to a piece of long form content that gives a few steps on how you can do that. Like, how do you understand, you know, a viable audience? How do you understand what to do with that viable audience in the next 3 months as we come closer to September? Okay, so we've taken some time, and just like every time, if you've been on one of my webinars before, I get like so revved up at about 15 minutes. So this is happening. I'm going to take a couple deep breaths as we head into retooling for the task. Section 2, retooling for the task. What we want to do now is look at the next phase. So we've all been in this very interesting paradigm over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 weeks, where we've seen the implementation and the introduction of tools into our quiver, if you will, in order to accomplish what I would call the maintenance tasks, right? We all had Zoom, we've had Zoom meetings, we're all Zoom experts now. We've seen TikTok how-tos and YouTube and all sorts of different tools that are being used in order to create connectivity and community. we've seen live recordings, you know, things like meetings with financial aid. All of these have been able to happen, and they've been able to be implemented very quickly. And in some ways, very much like on the fly, because they had to be. You know, we needed to maintain a certain level of relationship. But phase 2 goes into what's next. I know you've all been asking this question, right? What's next? What happens if in August, my school makes a decision that all of our fall events aren't going to happen? What happens to my predictive model? What happens to my ability to have real-time interaction with those students? Like, what is the next level of digital engagement and understanding market behavior that I can introduce? And I want to tell you a little bit about the tools that Capture uses, and I'm going to give some specific examples of how I see our tools being used and how you might be able to translate these into your own experience. I want you to know that, like, these tools that I'm going to show on the Capture level there are tools, and we would love to have a conversation with you about those tools. But pardon me, sorry. But what I really want to do is emphasize the fact that the tools that we have and have used in the past need to be ever growing and need to be ever expanding. We need to be able to understand analytics and understand, like, what is happening and how do I affect it. So I remember as a director of admissions annually, I would eagerly await for the e-expectations report that would come out. This is a long-standing document that's come out. Gives a lot of great insight and detail. It's an excellent piece of work. But as we think about where we are in the context of COVID-19, the unfortunate part is we have certain limitations. 2 of the 4 of the largest mechanisms for seniors and juniors are essentially on pause. We don't get the option of visiting campus, at least not in the Northeast yet. And we also know that the SAT and the PSAT and all those things, that deployment has stopped, and it has stopped for the next several months, leaving us with a pretty large void of potential ways to get information. Email's tried and true, right? That's always up there as a pretty long-standing, popular mechanism for getting in contact. But I want to draw some attention today to forms. And I know that this sounds super boring, right? Forms are, you know, they are what they are. But I think there's more to forms than we've given them credit for. And if you look right there on the top, overall, I mean, forms lead the pack here by a pretty large margin. And I think the unfortunate part is what we've done is thought about forms in this very kind of monolithic kind of way. And I want to challenge that. I don't know if I want to challenge the monolithic mindset. So Capture uses forms. For those of you who have seen a Capture demo, you've seen something called a PID, or a progressive identification form, which is, by the way, one of my favorite tools, one of my most favorite tools that we do. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a case study here on a tool that we implemented with a partner up in New England. This was a deployment to juniors. It was to students who are already identified. What we were trying to do is get a feel for, hey, what's the upcoming application going to look like when we open it up? What's the level of interest for current rising senior inquiries in order to gauge, like, you know, is there going to be an application shortfall? Are we going to be running down month over month? What can we expect? And how do we mitigate this? How do we introduce other digital campaigns to come out in front of it? So we introduced this document. You can see there's 4 radio buttons there that they can select. It has everything to do with the application. We did this actually in 2 phases. We did the prior to opening application and then the post application. And we were able to follow up with specific triggered emails based on the radio button that they clicked on. So if they said, oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to apply because I want to visit first, which obviously this year might be a little different, then we would send a triggered email out to them and give them details on how to schedule that visit, what to expect from a visit. Here are the results, because these results are amazing and they're not in isolation. We ran this campaign, this pre-application campaign, for just a little over 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, we had 200 students who saw it. We had 53 who completed it for a completion rate of 26%. This was an outstanding use of a form. And if we think about the context we're in, where students don't have access to those forms that might be things that they do on ACT or SAT or ways to give us information, think about all the potential uses for a form like this to understand where your audience is at. We were using this as a metric to understand our audience and their intentions to apply. But think about your fall 20 group right now. What pieces of information might you be looking for guidance from them? How might they steer the decisions that you make by answering a few quick questions like this? And then you can immediately turn that into a tactical response. Let me give you insight into another one. And this will be the final example on from the forms. This is a basic progressive identification, an identification form. You know, what I love about these forms is, and for those of you who are not familiar, you should understand that these forms come proactively at you. I think some of the negative part of our, standard RFI forms or our visit registration forms is that they're kind of buried in the background, right? They're 4 clicks in, they're 6 clicks in. You have to know where you're going in order to get them if you don't have a good call to action button on every page. And maybe that's only on certain pages. These forms are responsive to the students that they're looking at, to the web visit behavior that they are seeing. So in this case, this is a display to an anonymous web visitor. In many cases, we put this on select pages that have to do with admissions because that visitor is typically interested in the admissions process. And you can say here that this was a display after 2 or more visits to an admissions tagged URL. And in terms of best practice, we know that we don't want to interrupt the user experience on the website. So what we do is create a very quick and brief experience where they're seeing it and allowing them to interact with it. It has many, many use cases, and the great part is it always gets results. Average of 7% completion rate, and of those, that 7% that complete across all of our partners, lifetime average, 75% are organic. So again, think about the practical applications here. If you have a pool that is weak right now because you don't have fall 21 leads that are being brought to you from SAT or an ACT or another source, this is your source. If you just have 100 visitors come a day and you get 7 inquiries, 5 of them are organic, that's 100 inquiries a month. And that's just 100 anonymous visitors a day. We all know that our websites have far more visit traffic than that. On to point number 3, because I'm running out of time, just like always. The important thing we have to do is we can't wait. This situation that we're in is serious, and we are seriously running out of time for this cycle. I feel like my voice is getting really, really frantic, and I apologize. I don't want to increase the stress that's in your life already, but I do want to implore you to get started. We cannot wait to put these into practice. My good friend over at Platform Q, Gil Rogers, says this: we need to layer in these new strategies with our legacy plans. This is not about an if anymore. This is a when. We have to figure out how often, how well, and when these are going to be implemented. And you can see I put in parentheses there some of my own additional things. Virtual events is what he does, but we also do, digital outreach, chatbots, predictive models, behavioral data. These are things now that are becoming necessities to understanding your pipeline. And that's what we need to do. So there's 2 timelines to think through as you think about getting started. The first one is the fiscal year end. Again, going back to my days as a director of admissions, I always knew this time of the year there was always like a little bit of digging I could do to find some resources in order to put together a digital campaign or this or that. Think about what you can find. If there's any remaining budget, is there anything that you can do that have an immediate impact that will, that you can start something now and maybe have a dual purpose impact later on for fall 20 and fall 21? Or maybe what you need to think about is, what strategies do I want to put together that need time to marinate? Which ones are going to take longer to be deployed? Which ones are going to take longer to be developed? And then secondly, the end of the cycle. As you're looking at deltas, we all know the differences between year-over-year statuses, or pools of students, or program reach, or market representation. Understand and evaluate what those deltas are and where you can meet the biggest need. How can you mitigate the biggest difference, and what audience is going to have the maximum impact on maybe your net tuition revenue. Maybe you have questions about your online programs or different programs that are underrepresented. Which dollars are going to have the biggest impact at the end of the day, and that make your board and your president happy, and items like that. We've got to implement all summer, folks. This is the time where we have to go, and we have to keep going. So my encouragement to you is develop a 90-day success strategy. We have about a 90-day period, if you consider add drop, between where we are right now and the beginning of the semester. We don't know what that's going to look like. In many cases, we don't know what that's going to look like. So operate in short sprints. Establish 2-week deadlines for everyone. Put together work teams to look at your programs. Put together teams that look at your markets. Do some internal pushes. I remember, it's always important to set benchmarks and then to celebrate the wins that you get, and evaluate if you don't get to the benchmark, why? What happened? Think about what digital augmentations you need to do in order to build the strategic audience and build grow those market areas that need to be marketed to more. And then, as always, create contingencies. There might be shortfalls, there might be things that go south or sideways. Help to build plan Bs throughout this process. Think about your indecisive decision makers. What are you going to do if a student says, yeah, I need more time to make that decision, or a family says, I need more aid to make this decision, or I don't know what's going to happen? Think about what that's going to look like, and then ultimately think about this environment of prolonged digital engagement and what impact that's going to have. And I don't just mean on the next 3 months. I actually think that we're in a situation that's going to be sitting with us from now for the next 6 to 8 to 18 months down the road. So now is the time to begin thinking about those strategies and putting them into practice. Push to the bitter end, because we know this is going to be a finale of a year. So if I had to leave 3 points with you at the end to think about, here they are. Leverage your website data and make it work for you. Retool, think about what you need to get out of maintenance mode and push toward growth, optimizing every form that you have and every possible way you have to understand your audience. Don't settle for the has-been form. That is not enough, especially in our context. And get started. We implore you. We want to be there to help make this happen. But Capture also wants to see this environment of higher ed succeed and thrive. So do what you can to work in short sprints, measure everything, and be accountable. We're at the end of the actual content. I want to give a couple of quick notes. Here's my name, my title, and my email address. I know Emma referenced this earlier, but if you have questions particularly for me, if you need a sounding board for questions you have, shoot me an email. I'll give you a call. I'll write you back, whatever you prefer, in order to make this conversation be fruitful for you. I want to do that because that's part of what I do here at Capture. Secondly, I want to bring your attention to an upcoming event that we have called Innovate USA. Good news, it's free. It's online. You don't have to go anywhere. All you have to do is register. We are going to be streaming live on 5 platforms. This happens next week. 2 hours a day, 2.5 hours a day. It's going to be very, very awesome because we have a great set of speakers and little short segments that we're going to be going into. Ultimately, what we want to be doing is thinking future forward, given the context that we're in and what we're going to be doing. Here's a little bit of some blurbs about some of the keynotes that we have. There are some great other sessions that are on the list, including those about predictive modeling, understanding key data analytics and what to do with them. I encourage you, if you haven't signed up already, we would love to have you be with us. And again, let me just reinforce, it's free. Emma probably put that URL into the chat box. Thanks for your time, everyone. I finished on time. Mark the calendar.